Welcome back to the 11th Celt. My name is Patrick Quinn. I am the 11th Celt, and I'm a certified over-engineer. On the last video, I showed you guys how to build a very simple firewood sling, and I believe I ended it by threatening to show you how to make it overly complicated. In between then and now, I was bouncing ideas off of people, and one of them is a very good friend of mine who is a professional designer. And he looked at what I had put together, and his reaction was, "Dude, what are you doing? It's just a firewood sling." And to that I responded, "It's like you don't even know me anymore." He went on further to give me some more critiques. He said, so are you going to add molly gear or solar panels with USB chargers? How about level 3 body armor? Why not lights and wheels and maybe Bluetooth speakers? And I said, okay, now you're being ridiculous, but I like the way you think. So anyway, let's go ahead and look at what I've got laid out here. Since I was on here last, I went ahead and modified a couple of these firewood slings. As you can see right here, this is the one we just did, and you'll notice I added some D-rings onto it. I don't know if you can see it in the black, but I added those extra loops right there on either side. I did the same thing with the first one I built. I used a different kind of D-ring. I use different hardware in each one of these just to show you guys the diversity of the products that are out there, and give you some ideas on the different options of hardware that you can use on these things. Here we've got a sling that I built since the last video. As you can see, I've included all of the accessory components that we're going to use to over-engineer this thing. We've got two 6-foot lengths and 12 6-inch lengths of 1.5-inch webbing. We've got an assortment of all steel hardware. We've got 4 steel triangle rings, tri-glides with hooks, ladder locks, and lobster clasp snap hooks. You're not going to use all of these pieces of hardware at the same time. I've included them all because I've gone ahead and war gamed out all the different possible adaptations that you're going to use to employ this thing. Now, looking at all those accessories that are going to go on that sling, you're probably asking yourself, are those going to be on there all the time or not? And if not, what am I supposed to do with all of them? Well, the only ones that are going to be on there full time, along with the loops, are the 4 D-rings. Everything else is going to come separately, and to take care of that, I went ahead and built an accessories pouch. So, let's get to it. Okay, this is not really earth-shattering material right here, but for those of you who are not familiar of working with textiles, this is a technique that I use to set up my pieces on the fabric before I cut them out. Now, if you're going to make your piece out of multiple pieces of scrap material, I can understand doing them one at a time. But when you're working with a full sheet of fabric where you've got multiples of the same kind, it makes it a lot easier if you mark them all up at the same time before you cut them out. This is obviously the accessory pouch for the firewood sling. It comes in 3 pieces, 2 sides, and then the centerpiece. Doing the centerpiece, all I did was use a ruler to mark out the dimensions, and then for the side pieces, what I did was I actually drew this up on CAD and then transferred it to a piece of cardboard, in this case a beer box. And what you're going to do is you're going to mark out your center line on that as well. So what you do is you lay this on your fabric and then go ahead and mark it out. And then what you want to do is you want to put a tick mark at the end of that template line, where that line is, and then pull the template off and then bring that back a little bit. It doesn't have to be precision, just so long as you can line things up. Now, normally I have a 1/2-inch seam allowance on my projects, but because this fabric is so heavy and so bulky, I went ahead and cut it down to 3/8. That way you're going to have a little more room on the inside of your finished piece. And rather than having you guys go ahead and try to take a ruler and put tick marks 3/8 of an inch in on all sides, what I went ahead and did was go into CAD once again and make an offset model. I brought on 3 sides, I brought it in 3/8 of an inch, and then I marked it with a center line. That way you just line up all your points there. The sides, it's okay to eyeball it, but it's the end that you want to have lined up perfectly. Then you just do your outline again, and there's your offset. On the ends, again, like I did on the main piece, You go ahead and you draw a 1-inch line in. That way you can then just fold. So this end matches up with that line. And then you're obviously going to fold that again. However, you're not going to do that until this whole thing is sewn together, so it's just one great big seam going around. Another reason that you want to have this tick mark right here is, if you'll notice on the centerpiece, I have a corresponding tick mark right here, which is the center of this thing. When you're going to put this together, you'll see here in a bit when I assemble these things, you want this line to match up with that line. And then you're going to go ahead and just, as you pin it together, everything should line up to where this line right here matches up with this corresponding end right there. Now, if getting a hold of enough pieces of cardboard that are in good condition and big enough for your projects, not just this one, but ones you may want to do further on down the road, you can always do what I do, which is go over to Sam's or Costco. And the very first time I did ask permission, but I will go down the aisles and collect those 4x4 sheets. They might be a little bit smaller, but those are the layers they use to separate the products on the pallets. And after the quantity goes down to a certain level, they'll take those sheets out and put them off to the side. And they're not always very timely about collecting them. So, I always go out there and I can find between 2, and if on a good day I can get maybe a dozen of them that are in good condition. And then I bring them home and I use them for all my templates. So that's just an idea of what you can do to get free template material. Right, my AI or graphic design skills are still somewhat substandard, if non-existent, so we're back to the dry erase board. Last time I showed you guys how to do the box stitch to secure webbing and buckles onto the piece. Since we're using bigger pieces of webbing, I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit more robust stitch. There's 2 of them that you can try. One's going to be a V stitch and the other one's a W stitch. First, on the V stitch, what you want to go ahead and do is you want to go ahead and put your little anchor points or tack points. So you want to put a mark there and a mark there. So then what we're going to do is, for the V stitch, you're going to do your lock stitch here, then you're going to come across, then we're going to shoot up to the top, come over here across the top, come back down to the middle. You're going to come back up to this corner, come back across the top, come down on the bottom here. I'm shooting up the middle to that attack point, come back down here to this corner, and we're going to shoot across the bottom and lock it in. There's your V stitch. Again, the other stitch that you can do is a W stitch. Setup is very similar, only this time we're going to set up 3 attack points on either end. And we're going to start across the bottom and go up the sides like the last one. So there's your first stitch, go up the side, and then across the top. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start our W. Go down the first side, shoot back up to the middle, back down on the second leg of the W. Then we shoot back up into this corner up here, run another stitch across the top end. We're going to drop back down on this corner, and now we're going to start the mirror W. Follow the first leg up, follow it back down to the middle, go up to the anchor of your second leg. You're going to come back down to this corner, then you're going to finish up by going back across and locking in your stitch. Now, I realize there's probably going to be some professionals out there with, the riggers or manufacturing sewers who are going to look at this saying, dude, that is some serious overkill. Yeah, that's kind of the point. I did say I was a master of over-engineering at the beginning of this video. Look, I like to make things bomb-proof. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I mean, you can do an elongated box stitch if that suits your needs. Or you could do, the V stitch. If nothing else, just take this as practice, or exercises in honing your sewing skills. I'm probably going to go with the W just because I think it looks cool. And we'll go ahead and start building this thing. Now, before we can add all these pieces of webbing onto the main body, we have to go ahead and mark them up. So what we do is fold them in half. So now it's a 3-inch piece. And then what we're going to do is mark off 3/4 of an inch from the folded end. And what I recommend if you're working with your hardware is to do the loops with the hardware first. That way you don't find out you stitched up too many and now you've got to take one apart. All right, so we got our 4 hardware pieces done. Then we're going to go ahead and do all the others. Okay, now that I've got them all marked up, I'm going to go ahead and run just a quick stitch across that mark right there, one after another. Reason to do that, number one, it makes it real easy to hold these things folded like this when you're setting them on your main body. It also will provide the outside limit of your box stitch or W stitch when you're putting it on. Okay, as you can see, every one of these is all stitched together. This is a little trick I figured out years ago. So if you're doing multiple loops for a project, just go ahead and run a stitch across. Don't worry about locking it in. The whole idea is just to hold it in place until you can get it affixed to your project. I'm going to go ahead and separate all these and clean them up, and then we'll mark up the piece and start putting these on. All right, not really sure how well you guys can see this, but anyway, on each piece of webbing on both ends and on both sides, I've gone ahead and set in the placement marks. 4 3/4 inches in, the next one is at 7 3/4 in, and the third is at 14 inches in. Again, they're like this on the other end and on the other side right here. So now let's go ahead and start placing our pieces. Okay, so I've added my attack points as well on all the pieces. Now let's go ahead and place them. One thing you'll see me doing is after I get my first couple lines down, I'm going to go back and cut off these tails. Because what that does, that eliminates any snags underneath and just kind of helps the product continue to look clean. Okay, I finished adding all the mods to the Firewood Sling. You get the loops there at the end, triangle rings, loops there, and then mirrored setup on this side over here. I don't know if any of you have been looking at these things online, but I've seen some that have a shoulder strap attachment off here to the end, or off, on one of the sides, and it's not on any piece of the webbing that goes around the body of the thing. Now that might be okay if you're only going to use this thing every blue moon, but over time, that's a stress point, and eventually that's going to tear out of there, and you're going to have to either replace it or try to repair it. So it's better off to go ahead and attach your D-rings and your loops into the webbing on the body as it is, because it's not going to tear loose anytime soon. I've also got them spaced out to where, if need be, if one of these does blow out or tear, you can remove it without having to remove one of the other ones, so nothing overlaps. So this way, each one of these things is independent, so if they wear out, you can replace them independently. Let's look at the other side. All right, see, it looks pretty clean. There is all the W stitches. I know you can't see them on the other side, so here you go. Everyone looks pretty neat. Okay, now let's build the accessory pouch. Okay, so here are the components for the accessory pouch. And you can see it around, as I showed you earlier, you got the tick marks on here. And what you're going to do is you're going to line these guys up. You're going to do the center ones first, and you're just going to go ahead and pin in place. Another trick that I figured out when you're working on your curved edges is, in order to get things to line up, go ahead, go to your last two, your outermost pins, line them up, and it works really good with this fabric. You go ahead and line them up, and then you go ahead and just pinch it right there, and then when you open it back up, now you're going to have a line, so these points will line up when you're pinning them together. Okay, here's the first half put together. You're only going to put on one side at a time. All these pins tend to get in the way of things. You'll end up stabbing yourself more often than not. But as you can see, when I was talking about that spacing, this is about as good as it's going to get. All right, let's go ahead and start sewing this thing. Now when it comes to doing the first set of stitches, I prefer to go along the outline of the side piece. That way it'll be more uniform when it comes time to turning this thing right side out. Also, as you're making your stitch, you want to pull out the pins ahead of time, right before you get there. Most of the times the needle will jump over the pins, but on those occasions when it doesn't, It's going to really screw up the pin, and also you could potentially break your needle or put a big burr in it to where it'll start shredding the thread. Also, with this bulky, heavy material, you want to keep kind of manipulating it underneath there so it doesn't bulk up as you're coming across. Now what I'm going to do is go back and put in a second stitch right along the outside of that one, and that'll reinforce it. There's your first half of your pouch. I'll do the same thing for the other side. Okay, here's our pouch sewn together. What I did was I went ahead and snipped off material from these corners because we have to fold this down, and as you remember with doing the mitered corners on the sling itself, we had to remove some material. So this is the same concept right here. So let's turn it inside out now. Okay, got it turned right side out. Again, it's just a crude bag. It's not meant to be super neat. But now we go ahead and we're going to have to start folding in. When you do it, you want to fold this so that these ends are facing in on the sides, because that's the way you want this this bag to lay out when you're done with it. Okay, as you can see, we've got the double fold going on now. Use the bone folder to help clean up the edges, kind of straighten things out so it looks kind of uniform. The bone folder is not going to work on these seams right here just because it's such bulky material and it's so dense. However, I have found an unorthodox solution to resolve this problem. Now, I did say this was a bit unorthodox. I haven't seen this in any sewing manual, or I've never come across it, on any other projects that I've done. So, like I said, you got that bulked up material right there. So you take an anvil and a sledgehammer, and you just kind of hammer that down a little bit. All right, now let's run it through the machine. Now this would be a whole lot easier on a cylinder arm machine, but I don't happen to have one of those, but I can make this work. I don't have to go deep into the bag. Okay, now we'll do our second stitch. Now we're all stitched up. Now let's go put in some grommets. Doing the grommets, what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 on each panel and on the front and back pieces. So to put our marks in here, this thing is what, 5 1/4 across. So we'll come in 1 1/8. Put a little mark right there. Come over here. Again, this is for the front and backs. Okay, and on our sides, got a little over 2 inches there. We'll come in a little over 1/2. There we go. All right, and we get our punch and our sledgehammer once again. We go ahead and put these in. What I'm using is just an old piece of cutting board. This is going to shake the camera, so I'm going to put it on pause. Okay, got all our holes punched. Now we will add grommets. Okay, I picked up this grommet press years ago. I'll have to look online, see if I can find it. But yeah, so it comes with 3 different dies. I got 1 set in there already. And I just mounted it to this chunk of board right here. So we'll go ahead and start adding the grommets. Okay, grommets are in. Now let's do the finishing touch here. Okay, we've got our cord lock and 20 inches of paracord. So what we're going to do is we're just going to feed this guy through. Go ahead and put a little overhand knot in each one to prevent the paracord from slipping back through the cord lock. Okay, the pouch is finished. Okay, let's look at these accessories and the hardware that we're going to use. So, here's your 2 6-foot straps, and here's all the hardware. Now for this one, I'm going to rig it up a certain way, so we're not going to need some of this hardware. Now one thing you're going to notice on how I cut the webbing, usually when I cut it for fixing it onto something, I'll go ahead and give it a 90-degree cut. But when I'm using it for an adaptable or modular version, I'll go ahead and make it at like a 45. I mean, it doesn't have to be precise. But you're going to see how this is actually going to be more efficient to have your webbing cut this way. So this one, I'm going to show you how to set it up for shoulder carry. Okay, in this configuration, this allows you to go ahead and adjust the length of the straps. You're going to go ahead and dress them down so everything is, as far as on this end, that you're going to have uniform lengths, so the straps will be the same length, and they will also, the buckles or the tri-glides will be in the same position. As far as what you can do with the bag, there's two ways you can do this. You can either put it over here, hang it behind this loop, then you just bring your strap around and lock it in, or again, that's only if you want to do that. It's not absolutely necessary, but I make things to be modular and adaptable, so you'll always be able to do that. All right, I've gone ahead and set these straps up already. You've got your tri-glides, and you've got tri-glide hooks. This is all metal hardware. You can do this with plastic hardware as well if you want, but since this is basically just a grunt work piece of equipment, I went ahead and just used steel or alloy for everything. Okay, so for this one, instead of using a clasp, a swivel hook or whatever, you got to make sure you got them facing the right direction. You want the hooks facing out. And all we're going to do is come over here to these upper loops, and we are just going to feed that in like that. You want your buckle, you want your tri-glide on the outside, otherwise it's possibly dig into you. Again, you want to set this up and feed it back through with a locking loop. So. If you're worried about this end coming undone, just add another tri-glide on there and lock it again this way. Let's see, there's hand carry, then there's that strap version, there's this configuration. Okay, here we have our final configuration. For expediency, I went ahead and just wrapped this log sling around an aspen log. It's easier to manage on the workbench here instead of a bundle of firewood. So, and as I'm going through this, hopefully you guys will understand where I'm going to go with this configuration. All right, like with the hooked shoulder straps, we're going to use everything but the snap clips. Let's go ahead and rebuild this. Okay, we got about equal lengths now. All right, then we have two straps. Now we take our log sling and we find our number one loop and we hook that in. Roll this around and we find our bottom loop right there. Hook it in that way. So now what you have is a little backpack. Now again, these are 6-foot straps. For you bigger guys out there, or if you want to cover a wider range of users, you might add a foot or two onto this shoulder strap right here to accommodate bigger bodied guys. Okay, to recap, I managed to take a simple firewood sling and turn it into 3 complicated configurations. Let's go back and look at all 4 of them again. The first off is there's the regular hand-carried version of the sling. The second is the shoulder-carried version using the tri-glides with hooks. This modification will make it easier for you to walk a longer distance without smoking your hands or your arms. The third version is also shoulder-carried, but with the use of the lobster clasps instead of the hooks. Also to note that you can incorporate the leftover hardware, in this case the aforementioned tri-glides with hooks, for running a loop from the shoulder strap through the tri-glide to create a tension loop for securing your axe if you need a free hand to carry something else, such as a chainsaw or something. And the fourth version is the backpack carry configuration. This would come in handy for things like hunting camp, so you can keep your hands free for carrying your trusty shooting iron should you come upon any game, or if you're just camping in the back country or mountains, and you not only have to carry firewood over longer distances on uneven terrain, but situational awareness dictates you keep your hands free to deploy your chest carry life preserver if necessary. Well, now that that project has been over-engineered to the level that I had wanted, it's time to move on to something else. I do appreciate you guys watching, and I will have the next video up here as soon as possible. Thank you.